Welcome everybody from around the world. So this is our 30th RippleLIVE episode. I believe we've done this 30 times now. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We are excited to have you with us in our live feed. We do this, every few months to kind of get up to sync with all the new features, answer questions, and just generally answer all the questions related to Final Cut, Motion Compressor, any post-related questions you have. So we'll be here probably hour and 15 minutes, something like that, depending on how many questions we get. But hey, Mark, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Steve. I cannot believe that this is 30 episodes we've done of this show now. It's really crazy. Mm-hmm. One day we'll do it together.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, you want to discuss the show format a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So if you're new to the show, if you're not new to the show, welcome back. If you're new to the show, welcome. I highly recommend you hit the subscribe button below. If at the end of the show you change your mind, you can always unsubscribe, but you can get it out of the way right now. So we're going to answer questions about Final Cut Pro, Motion, and related topics. We did send out a request for some questions in advance, so we're going to start with those, but you can always drop a question in the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them. If you want to make a nominal contribution to support the show, there's a super chat button, a little $sign. You can contribute any amount that you're comfortable with. What that will do, by the way, is also make your question big and pop it up to the top so we'll see it. But you don't have to do that. We'll make every effort to answer every question that we can over the next hour or so. Anything else, Steve?
I think that's it. We have a lot of questions to get through today. And like I said, we're monitoring from chat, so put them in there. And if for some reason we do miss your question, it's possible. We get a lot of questions. Just post it again. Just know that it's nothing personal. We're not trying to ignore you. There's just a lot of people in the chat. So just post your question again. We'll do our best to get to them. All right. So let's get to the topics at hand. So Mark, I think you have the first question. Do you not?
I do. Oh, by the way, do you want to show everybody? Are you already showing?
Yeah. No, I didn't.
Different views.
I think I didn't know. So we're using. It might be good to show our setup. So here is I have an iPhone directly behind me set up through using Filmic Pro. I'm using the wide lens, so you can see we're crammed into a tiny room here. There's Travis and Curtis, and you can see our setup here. So yeah, and then Mark, you have a little.
Yeah, so in addition to, we can switch to sharing screens like this. I also have another camera angle back here, which is also my iPhone connected in the same way over HDMI using Filmic Pro with the HDMI out, just so you can kind of see I'm in a bit of a temporary setup right now because we're in the middle of a house renovation, but this is kind of my setup right now. So, yeah, with that, so we're going to go, by the way, we're going to go in order on the ones that are already submitted. I do see some other ones coming in the chat, and we will filter those in as well. The first question was, and this is funny because this does come up a lot, what is the easiest and fastest way to create an audio visualizer for video in motion to use for a podcast on YouTube? I tried to find any plugins to buy, but I didn't find any good options. Do you have any recommendations for Final Cut Pro plugins to buy? So this one's a little bit tricky because the one thing, Motion is fantastic for making things for Final Cut Pro, both for yourself and buying plugins that were made in Motion, which is part of what we do. One limitation that it has, though, is audio doesn't come with it. So you can't sort of like make a cool audio visualizer in Motion, drop in Final Cut, and add audio to it to have audio drive it. But you can do it in Motion. It's just not really fast. And I'm not going to take through a whole thing, but I am going to show you very, very briefly here. On my screen, I have a simple rectangle shape, and I've put the anchor point for it at the bottom of the screen. And I've imported a little audio track here. And you see I've used the audio parameter behavior, which allows you to animate any parameter you want by audio. So it can be the scale of something or the position of something or the rotation or the color or the speed of an emitter. I mean, just about anything you can think of, you can animate with audio and motion, which is really powerful. And not only that, you can restrict the frequency range and the amplitude range over which it's being impacted. So for this little rectangle, I just have it driven by this audio, so I'll play just a little bit of it. Okay, so it's like a little audio meter, and that's kind of the basic idea of something you can build in motion. The other thing I did, you notice it kind of gets red when it gets high up around here somewhere. Yeah, right there. And that's because I just added a little image mask to a couple of shapes behind it so that it kind of gets red like a meter. So the basic idea is you'd construct a bunch of these and have each one be a separate range of frequency, and you could get something that's accurate. Now, a lot of times people don't care. They just want something bouncing up and down, and that's easy. You can just, buy a little animation from multiple places. It's just not really reacting to the audio. But in motion, you can make something that actually responds to the audio.
All right. So hopefully that answered that question. And we're going to just jump into the next one. I'm noticing in the chat there's a lot of questions about performance on M1 Ultras, M1 Max. We are going to get to those questions. So we got a lot of questions pre-show, so we'll definitely answer that. Let's jump into the next question, which you have here. Let's see here. All right. So this question is actually related to one that someone just asked about what we'd like to see in future versions of Final Cut, because we've been waiting for dupe detection for 10 years, and we have it now. So what are some of the other things that you'd like to see? And then also that's related to this question that was asked, which is, what is the change in Final Cut Pro that's going to affect most people's work moving forward? Well, that's an easy one. I thought about this, and I feel like the most important change is machine learning, AI. And we're already seeing that now implemented more and more. But I think there's some uses for it that aren't currently being implemented. Now, the way it's being used right now, machine learning, is it's kind of an all-in-one an all-in-one approach. We're going to create an app using machine learning that cuts somebody out of the background. And a lot of times that works. And depending on the quality of the data that you're giving the algorithm, sometimes it doesn't make a perfect key or whatnot. There's always going to be just something that might be a little off because the decisions are being made by the information that's pretty much been compiled into the app. So I had a good friend with my friend Alexis Van Herkman, who does a lot of colorists, and he said, what I'd like to see is more machine learning that does practical things that save you a lot of time, not necessarily machine learning that does an all-in-one approach. And here's an example he gave, and I'm interested in your feedback. Well, a lot of times you're editing, and I don't want to just search for, hey, like an assistant editor, I need to see all the close-ups. Well, everybody has close-ups in their video, right? I mean, how useful? It's never useful to say, find me all the close-ups, but what machine learning would be really useful for is, show me all the shots that have a mountain in them. Show me everything that has a river, or show me everything that anybody that's wearing a red shirt. Now, that becomes really practical. So I don't have to spend all this time searching for it. The AI is doing the work for me, and currently we don't, as far as I know, we don't have anything like that, and I'd like to see that level of AI where we're using it for practical stuff. Here's another example. How often do you have to put an oval on somebody's face because you need to track it because you're gonna, maybe, add some, additional exposure to the face or whatever. Right now, you drop the mask on it, you adjust the shape or whatever, and then, so there's a couple of steps. Wouldn't it be interesting if the AI did something a little bit more practical where you just said, make a mask, and just with one click, it knows where the face is, puts a mask on it, you don't have to adjust its shape, and you're ready to go. That's where I see machine learning can be really useful, where you're taking away steps from something that you do every day. So that's where I'd like to see machine learning go. Any thoughts on that, Mark, that you have?
Yeah, it just brings up to me this idea of keeper, and I'll switch to my screen right
Sure.
here that is using machine learning. And I've done you guys have probably already seen, I did a Mac Studio on this a week or two ago, but it uses machine learning to remove, here's a shot of me in front of my desk where I'm sitting right now. And if I drag keeper onto that, it just is kind of crazy, right? I mean, it just does a decent job. It's not a keyer, but it does a decent job of recognizing a person. It's using machine learning to recognize people and remove them from the background. So, it's a good example of kind of where this stuff is going with machine learning. And if you haven't seen that episode, if you go to our YouTube channel, it is right here, extract people from backgrounds. So it's exciting where this stuff is going. A little scary too, because of what can be done with it. But all of a sudden you can do things that were very hard to do before.
So
hey, I wanted to Go ahead, Steve.
No, there's some chat questions I think we should probably look at too. As people are posting questions, so I don't want to feel like people are watching live or ignoring you. We're not. So we're gonna look at that. Jari, thank you for that super chat. Really appreciate it. Yes. Thank you for that. So I want to just go up in the list, just make sure that we got.
And Philip McDonald also. Thank you very much for the contribution. So, hey, I wanted to address. There's one I see in there from Stephen Wick.
Yes.
Saying, can I use the new tracker function to set a mask on an object that I don't want to apply a key to? My talent sometimes forgets not to bring green items to a shoot. I'm using Hawaii keyer. Try to say that 10 times fast. So the object tracker can track effect masks, okay? So when you apply an effect, it can track an effect mask. It can't track a draw mask, which is usually what people want to do. Now, stay tuned. I have a new free YouTube tutorial coming out about motion. You can use motion to very easily make basically an object remover, a trackable object remover for Final Cut. It's super easy to do, and it will do what you want it to do, what you're asking for in this question. So I would just say stay tuned for that shortly in the next week or two.
Awesome. So going down the list, someone's asking about the performance of M1 Max and Ultra on certain things. We'll get to that, I promise. We'll go down to Matt Crane's question. What is your recommended method to use a magnetic timeline to edit time to music? Once you start trimming, moving, adding clips, the entire edit is no longer timed to the soundtrack. There's a couple of ways to do that. I typically connect the music. I put it as a connected clip, and then I put on my B-roll or the things I'm cutting to, like in the primary storyline, so that the music is kind of stays locked to whatever that first clip is. And then I'm adjusting all of the clips in the primary, trimming it, rolling it, rippling it, whatever. The music is kind of staying connected at the bottom. That's my approach. Mark, you might have a different approach, but that's just one way of doing it.
Yeah, no, I do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I do the same thing.
Yep.
We also had Ron Haynes from Missouri. Mm-hmm. Welcome, Ron. I'm all about high school sports and trying to figure out how to incorporate motion into my sports highlight videos. Mm-hmm. Brain freeze here, not certain how to do that. Well, it depends what you want to do, but first of all, in iMovie, there's a great sports template that includes things like rosters and scores, and all of that will come into Final Cut. So you can just take that template in iMovie and you put it into a project, and then you import that project into Final Cut Pro. I believe you can even just send it to Final Cut Pro now, and then you've got that to work with in Final Cut Pro. So that's a super fast way to immediately have access to some nice professionally designed templates that will allow you to drop in drop zones for players and show scores and things like that. Otherwise, you probably just want to start learning what you can do in motion. And you'll want to watch this video that's going to be out in a little bit. And compliments, Steve, if you guys haven't seen it, again, it's on our Ripple channel there, but Steve has a fantastic 1-hour introduction, learn Final Cut in less than 60 minutes. That's totally free. And you should definitely check that out if you are new to Final Cut.
Yeah. So there was someone mentioned NAB. I just found out yesterday that I am going. A good friend of mine, Abba, was teaching all the Final Cut Pro classes. He can't make it, so I'm pinch hitting. So been 2 years since I've been there. So if you're going to NAB, I will be there, and I'll be teaching some Final Cut Pro classes. Just point that out. Ridgecrest, Ray Hawker just mentioned that. Okay. Let's see. I'm just going through these questions here, and before we get back to our spreadsheet, anything else that you noticed that we want to get to?
Yeah, I did. David Van Hooser. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, David. I asked this as an old timer. Welcome. In an era when most video is viewed on devices rather than conventional TV monitor, how important is action safe and title safe? I would say there's a lot of people editing video these days that don't even know what those terms mean. So I don't think they are as important as they used to be, because there's just not an overscan. Most everything that you can see on your screen when you're designing will be seen on the screen when it's viewed. So I don't think they're as important. I do think they're important from a design perspective, just to keep things looking good and not crowding the edge of the screen, but they're not, I don't think they're technically as necessary as they used to be.
Yeah. All right. Excellent question. So you guys keep them coming. We're going to jump back to our spreadsheet and keep moving down the list. So I answered the question about machine learning. That's where I think Final Cut's going, where I think it should go, is more machine learning. So there's a question about, when you asked about bin locking, I think you were going to answer that, Mark, right? Or, oh wait, I should just read it. Does Final Cut allow bin locking when multiple editors are working in a shared project? So I guess we should define what bin locking is, or people aren't familiar with that term or where it came from.
Sorry, I'm just trying to copy this link. To
okay, so so he's asking about what bin locking is. That term came from Avid. Avid is another competing NLE. But basically, if multiple editors are working on a list, I need to, if you get working on a project, if you have 2 bins with media in it, one editor could decide to lock that bin so the other editor can't, overwrite or make changes to that bin. That's essentially what it does. There isn't a bin locking feature in Final Cut, but if you're interested in true collaborative workflow, where you have multiple editors working on tagging and adding metadata and working on different versions of the project, I can't stress enough that you need to use PostLab. PostLab is this great product, and I'm going to talk about it again, that essentially allows you to store your media in the cloud and have one editor work on a project, then push it to the cloud. Another editor pulls it down, makes changes. While they're making the changes, that project or that library becomes locked till they're finished with it. Then that next editor essentially pulls down a version and then works on that one. And it's essentially like bin locking, except it's treating the entire library as a locked entity as opposed to individual bins or events within a library, if that makes sense. So you definitely want to check out PostLab if online collaboration between editors is your thing. All right.
I posted a link to PostLab in the chat there, and it does. So there really isn't a way to do bin locking, but you do the alternative of bin locking is check in, check out, which is pretty much what that does. So you make sure that you're not both changing the same thing at the same time. Yeah. The next one that we got submitted in advance is a question about the sliced scale effect, which I'm going to show a little bit later. Why did the Final Cut team choose this as a feature update when there's such a long list of feature requests out there? I'm not saying it's not useful, just there are more universally requested functional improvements. This is one of those questions that we can't answer. Any question about why Apple does something or what's going to happen next is really impossible for us to answer. I can't tell you, although I can tell you it's super cool. And actually, Steve, is it okay if I just show?
Yeah, go ahead.
Quickly, because I think if you haven't already seen it, I did a demo. Let me switch to my screen here. I did a whole video. It's in the What's New in Motion. If you haven't seen that, sorry, let me just bring this up here. What's New in Final Cut Pro in Motion. You definitely want to check that out because it goes into detail about how to use it in a more, in something like this, where you have a title and you want the background, this little talk bubble, to scale correctly. Because normally if you were to scale up and down, it would scale this, it would scale the corners, it would look terrible. But now with this slice scale filter, you can increase the font size or change the amount of text, and it will scale very nicely because of this slice scale filter. And all the details are in that particular video. But there's some fun things you can do with it too. And these are kind of silly, but I think they're kind of fun. So for instance, the slice scale filter can either stretch or it can create copies. So if it's set by stretch by default, so I've got this stock photo of these bottles, and if I just drag the top, I can sort of make them all taller based on where this rectangle is. So it just stretches anything that's inside the rectangle. But if I set it to whole tiles instead, I can quickly add copies of that one bottle to some stock photos, which you could do by cutting it out and doing various Photoshop things. But this makes it super fast and easy to do something like that. Or I'm in the middle of doing some moving, so let's say you've got a sofa. You might recognize this sofa from the video that can't fit in the truck. Well, I can take this picture of the truck and add some more space to it, so I can then take that sofa and fit it in the truck. So there's some kind of fun things that you can do with it. Another example is this guitar, where if you need a few extra frets on your guitar, you can just use that slice scale filter to add them. Again, kind of silly, and that's why I didn't put it in the main thing. But like, here's a ladder, and it's another corporate video, but you can animate this as well. So it's not, anything I'm doing can be animated. So, this guy's climbing the ladder, and you can just sort of extend it up like, hey, you're never going to reach the top. So I can see there's some useful places that you could animate it and something like that. It even works on 3D. So I have this 3D bed here, one of the built-in, let me rotate it here, one of the built-in 3D objects in Final Cut, in Motion, that you can publish to Final Cut. I should actually select the bed right here if I'm going to rotate it. There we go. So we've got that bed there. And with the slice scale on that, I can both make the bed longer, you notice where this rectangle is, or make it wider and add more pillows to it at the same time, which is just kind of cool. The different things you can do with this. If you've got a car that you want to stretch out, you can make that car longer. Or if you've got some text, you can do some fun things with text by stretching it in, depending where you put the slice scale, you can stretch it in different ways. And of course you can animate all this. So just a couple of fun things you can do with that slice scale filter. If you use Final Cut and you don't use Motion, you're going to want to use Motion. And if you're already using Motion, just check this thing out. You can publish all of it to Final Cut and mess with it in Final Cut as well.
Cool. All right, so we had a couple other questions coming in from our live chat. Let's back up to some of the earlier ones here. So Peter Downey had mentioned that clients hate it when the YouTube bar obscures graphics, and then the Action Safe is pretty helpful for that. I'm glad he said that. Okay, so Stephen Wick asks, what would you make jump cuts smoother, more professional? Jump cuts? I mean, that's a pretty much a aesthetic, creative, personal thing. I mean, one of the things that, are you cutting to music? Are you cutting dialogue? What do you mean by jump cuts? YouTube videos and music videos are very jump cutty. So it really depends on really the style of the aesthetic you're going for. If it's dialogue, you want to pretty much hide the cuts as much as possible. But if it's it's an energetic piece, you're probably going to be cutting the music on the beat. And, one thing that people do a lot of times is they just cut right on the beat, which is very predictable. You're just like, oh, that's a cut. Your audience knows it's coming. So, the trick is maybe cut maybe not on the beat, or maybe a little, at, something like in the 16th note or an offbeat somewhere. So again, that's not so predictable. I don't have anything to show you, but it really depends on what you're cutting. Stephen, thanks for the super chat. Richard Arbach, thanks for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And there was a question about compressors and limiters, I believe. Let's see here. Best practices to enhance dialogue audio, compressor limiter. Well, we use compressors. I mean, limiter is kind of like something you put on at the very end of the chain so that you don't have certain, like what I call little transients or spikes, running into zero or clipping. But it's not something I use to control dynamics. Now, what I mean by dynamics is kind of the, if you look at the waveform, it's that dynamic range. It gives, the highs and the lows in the signal. A lot of times what a compressor does, if you're not using it properly, it's called a brick wall. So if you're too heavy-handed with it, you'll see the waveform just like clip. It's just like, that's it. It's like an 1,000 to 1 compression ratio. It's just boom. We prefer compressors because you can set ratios, and which is much more fluid, much more organic way to deal with those spikes, because you can basically say, okay, when any audio transient goes over this level, you can then say reduce it by this amount, by this ratioed amount. And so you're able to maintain the kind of the dynamics of the person speaking, or if it's an instrument, a drum, or what have you, you're not kind of stepping on it and it sounds all crushed. So we prefer compressors, and at the very end of the chain, we'll put a limiter on just to kind of to deal with those last few spikes. And you can do that in one plugin in Final Cut. The compressor plugin in Final Cut, you can compress, and then there's a limiter to the right side that you can then you can turn on. So that's our recommendation.
Maybe channel EQ is needed.
Huh? And then what's that?
Channel EQ as needed.
Oh, Travis back there from the Peanut Gallery is saying that maybe what?
Maybe use channel EQ as needed and small adjustments.
Okay, cool. Channel EQ and small adjustments. All right. Awesome. So let's get it back to our spreadsheet there, Mark, and see what we had to keep. We have still quite a few. Did you want to say something?
Yeah. Just let me address a couple that are in the chat,
Sure.
and then maybe you can take the next one on the spreadsheet. A couple people are noticing a few issues with the latest update, and I want to talk about a couple things about that. So, always before you update Final Cut, what I'd recommend to do is right-click on your current app and compress it, and then label it. So that way you can always go back. You've always got a version to go back to. And if you want to be very careful as well, duplicate a library before opening it in the new version and just make sure you're happy. That can be a big deal if your libraries are self-contained, if all the media is inside. So if that's the case, you could temporarily just consolidate all your media outside the library on the same drive, so it won't actually do a copy operation. It'll just move it somewhere, and you could always move it back in. But one thing I can verify is there's some issues with adding transitions to 10.6.2. If you try to drag them on, like you can't replace a transition. If you drag one transition on another, it doesn't replace it. But you can still add transitions by selecting the edit point and double clicking on the transition to add it, or by using the keyboard shortcut Command T for the default transition. And you can assign default transition to any transition you want, but I've definitely seen that. And Jason Williams was mentioning an issue that I've seen several people post about importing, from old mini DV stuff that's not working. I can't verify that. I've just seen several people post that. And just another reason, like if that's something that's really important to you, if you've got a backup version of Final Cut to go to, that you can do that. If that's actually a bug, I'm sure Apple is aware of it and doing something about it, and we'll get it fixed out quickly to deal with it.
Thanks, Trina. Thanks, Peter, for the super chat. And Stephen, if we haven't, thank you for that. Richard, thank you very much. So there was a question about updating your tracking tutorial. Are you going to update it? And well, let me just say right now that we did one small thing. We added a movie to the current tracking tutorial. If you own it, you can go up there, and we added Mark added like a 2-minute little introduction to show you what the differences are, because really the tracker still works the same. They've just put a lot of those features in that little drop-down menu above the viewer. And so he has them. If you go back there, right now it's up there. We've updated. You could watch his movie, but the ultimate goal is to reshoot it. We just don't have a time frame for it.
Right. So we will, but it's a nice change. It's a really nice feature change in terms of the UI, mm-hmm. But really the functional change is that now you can scale things proportionally, which is fantastic. So the everything else in that tutorial, everything does what it works the same way. It's just a little better now. Yeah, Ben's asking about dropping in transition, not working anymore. That's what I was just talking about. I think that happened with the 10.6.2 update. What do you guys think of the new voice isolation tool, Steve? You want to address that?
It's so funny. I love it. I love anything that makes my life easier. I mean, I get feedback from documentary filmmakers all the time on YouTube. Like, you're running gun doc. You don't always have control over the background. You just got to get the recording. And the fact that this does such a good job of mitigating that background noise, I just think it's fantastic. I mean,
it's great.
It's meant. Well, you watch my video.
No, it's fantastic. And honestly, I'm in this temporary situation. I've got a refrigerator behind me that turns on, and I was like going over there and getting behind it and unplugging it. But I don't need to do that anymore. I'm telling you, I just turn that thing on. I just do one click and it takes it out, and it doesn't mess my voice up. I mean, I love that thing. I mean, dupe detection is great. And can be very useful when you've got to make sure you didn't use the same photo or the same clip multiple times. It's great, but I don't use it every day. Voice isolation, I use every day already.
Yeah.
By the way, just to there's a question later on. Let's just answer it now while we're talking about it. Somebody asked if you can use it in multicam clips. And the answer is yes, you can, of course, but you should use it in the angle editor. In other words, double click on a clip in your multicam project, go into the angle editor and apply it to the entire audio track for that angle at one go. And it passes through to the multicam project.
Yeah. Ben says he doesn't find Ben Balzer says he doesn't find the voice isolation tool any better than third party. That may be true, but I just like, if I can do it in one click and it sounds close to that other stuff without doing all that, moving sliders and, that's just me. Maybe I'm just lazy. I mean, just like, I'm just a lazy guy.
Gert was asking if it removes echo. It doesn't remove echo. It's not a deverb. That's something different, but it does a very good job of isolating a voice and dropping out background noises.
Yeah. All right. So I think maybe we should get back to the spreadsheet.
Yes, go for it.
So one question that came up was about keying. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, it says, I know this isn't a 10.62 question, but I thought, what the heck, I tried. I did buy your keying training quite a while back, and you'd had one of us about blending the talent with the background. It was pretty simple. I wish you could show an example of blending talent with the background so it looks natural. All right, so now it's my turn to switch to my UI. And so these clips are from Mark's green screen tutorial, and if you don't have this tutorial, I highly recommend it because he basically shows you every scenario that you're going to run into, from like crappy iPhone footage. There's Travis, and we can see we just used really crappy green screen behind the window. I mean, he shows you like, and then we have very nice stuff my friend Abba lit with this model, to stuff that we shot ourselves with our with our Blackmagic cameras. So this is a big subject. And then your question is, what backgrounds? Well, there's all kinds of different backgrounds. There's like, okay, there's this type of background where it's, it's a sunny day and the sun's directly ahead, a lot of shadows. There's this background where it's more, it's a kind of a photorealistic rendering. So what background are we talking about? So it's a very, it's a very wide canvas question to come up with an answer. However, there are a couple of things that I would recommend. Number one is, I think if you're gonna do a key, you shouldn't be doing a key completely in a vacuum. You should have some idea of where you're going to be placing your subject into. I don't see how you could not think about the background prior to shooting the key, because you're going to want to match the lighting for the subject to the background. Right? So here, this is Michelle, and she's standing in front of a lit door, and it's very soft lighted. I could sell this shot. I mean, I really could. And one feature that Mark talked about in his tutorial that we think it's just magic is like, I'm going to go over here and go down to the key effect, and this thing called light wrap. And what it does is right now you can see it's pretty kind of hard edge to her hair there. And I really if this was a big door, it would be kind of like, coming through her hair strands here, and it'll be blended a lot more. And this is about good use case scenario of when to use light wrap. So I'm going to go ahead and drag the amount all the way up, just crank it all the way up. and immediately you see that it's like it's blending the pixels. I'm gonna see if I can zoom in a bit here, and you can see here it's just softening. It's creating a nice a feathered blend, and then you can control, again, you can control the amount and the intensity, and you can even control like the composite mode, whether it's an overlay or a screen or whatnot, and you can get different results for how you might blend the background. But I find this to be a really, really, really great tool. This one, let me go back to Lighten. And so again, you get this nice softened light wrap. Zoom out, and just that one control makes, you know, makes a difference here. I could sell this shot just with that, and it works with a lot of other shots too. But I just wanted to show you that. Oh, there's one problem with the light wrap Mark wanted to show you, is that if you look at the very bottom here, it's creating this. It's like you can see it. It's affecting the bottom of the frame. So all you need to do is add a little bit of scaling. I'll turn on transform, and look, see that? See, it just kind of goes away. And if you're shooting in a 4K or something, you got a lot of resolution to work with. I think it works really, really well. Okay, so that is my answer to my green screen question. And check out Mark's green screen tutorial.
Awesome. See.
All right.
Let me get through a couple of things in the chat here. A bunch of questions about voice isolation. Some concerns saying it doesn't always work. You apply it in the angle editor. It doesn't always carry through the timeline. I'll have to do some testing on that, Ben. I just tested this morning. It worked okay, but I'll look at it some more. Question about where it is, I posted in the chat. You have to go to the audio inspector once you select a clip in your timeline. It's only, my understanding, you have to have Monterey. So if you're on Big Sur and you're looking for it, you're not going to find it. You do need to be on Monterey for that. You don't need to be on Monterey for dupe detection. And there's also a question here about dupe detection doesn't work on the browser. And no, I don't know why you'd need it in the browser. I mean, if you import the same clip again into the same event, Final Cut recognizes it's already there and it's not going to import a duplicate. But maybe you're importing into multiple events, different clips, and you want to know if you had duplicates. But it's really designed. The purpose of the dupe detection is for checking if you use the same clip in a timeline. I'm stuck in traffic. Oh, so Yari, and Yari, I might be saying your name wrong, but he says that Monterey 12.3 dropped the FireWire DV support, so it's the OS. And I don't know if that's true, but Yari, I see him on Facebook all the time. And every time I do, he's always posting correct information, which is like 1% of people who post answers to questions on Facebook. So I trust the guy, and that is very likely the case. I'll look that up so we can post something about that. But that's kind of a bummer because, you know, I actually transferred all my DV tapes onto a drive about a year or so ago, just so as I was afraid, you know, everything's going to go away in terms of, you know, being able to run those tapes anymore. Let's see, maybe we go back to, you did the light wrap thing, great. Yeah. So I'm going to just look at our questions here in the spreadsheet. Sure. How did the updates affect those of us still on Intel Macs? Well, Steve's got an Intel Mac, I've got an Intel Mac, and they work great. Yeah. You know, we're very happy with them on Intel Macs.
I have no issues.
Yeah, agreed. What do you think of KeyFlow Pro 2 with Final Cut Pro 10.6.2?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think everybody should have KeyFlow Pro 2. I'll talk more about this later in the episode, but I haven't tried it with this version, but there's no reason to think that it shouldn't work. But I think it's a great app.
Next one is, I sent in a suggestion about a course learning codecs. Does that still apply to anybody who wants to work with video or to have another opinion? I think codecs it's very important to understand codecs. It's not very exciting stuff, but it's very useful. And I think a course is a great idea. You know, we did one for Frame.io a few years ago, but that's not public, is it?
I don't think so.
I
mean, my feeling is that I just do a search, just type in video codec, and there's so much like good information on the web.
There's a couple of amazing YouTube videos that go into depth on codecs that must have taken, you know, a month or more to make, with great motion graphics and everything. Yeah. So we're not going to do that because it's there, but I would check that stuff out there. Hello, although I haven't installed 10.6.2 as of yet, I have a question on still photos being marked as used media. I use slideshow drop zone templates, and I've noticed Final Cut does not show those as used media. I was wondering if 10.6.2 might implement that feature, or is it just the nature of being using a third-party drop zone template? So here's the deal. I tested this out. Dupe detection does not work with media added to drop zones. It just doesn't. So that's a great feature request. And I know Steve determined that it also does not work with clips that have been retimed.
Yep.
Correct, Steve?
That's actually on their the Apple knowledge base. They say, Apple says it won't work on any retimed clip.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you change the speed, anyways, if the clip is anything but 100%, you will not see dupe range flags on the clip.
Yeah. What is the best way to screen and log clips in Final Cut? The notes field in the index seems limiting. I know there must be a better, more complete way to do this that also shareable with other people working on the project. You want to?
Yeah. The thing about Final Cut, what makes it really amazing is that you can create selection ranges and then favorite those ranges. You can create custom keywords based on those ranges. The notes field is like really the very baseline of information that you can handle in an editor. I'm not saying the notes field's not useful, but the fact that Final Cut gives you so many different ways to tag clips. I'm gonna go ahead and like here I have this long interview. It's like hour, so I can I can set an in and an out and go over here and Command Shift I, Command Shift O. And I'm actually, this is what I love about Final Cut. I can make multiple persistent ranges on one clip. You can't do this on any other NLE. And then now if I press F, those are all favorited, right? So then when I filter this to the favorites, it's just gonna be that content within those ranges, and inside there you can see it's favorite, and I can name that. I can go into this favorite and I can name that favorite something meaningful. I could say where they're saying something about talking about, these guys are talking about the Bible, talking about Genesis, whatever. So they're, I can't even spell it right now. So basically you can create a range, and then I can actually make a note about it, and all of this can be shared, all of it. Now, if I could direct your attention back to what I keep going back to KeyFlow Pro, and this is the second time I've mentioned it. The beauty about KeyFlow Pro, again, is you can do all of this in KeyFlow Pro or here, and then you could share it with KeyPro, and all that tagging can be shared with anybody online. You can pull it down, all the tags will be there. You could use that, or if you don't want to, spend $50 for that, you can, just make a transfer library, and then, which is a small little footprint library that you can share with another editor. And when they open up that library, all of your tagging, all your keywords, all your favorites, they're all there. So anything you want to add to that, Mark?
I do. I'm going to post it in the chat right now. Is lumberjacksystem.com.
Right.
These guys have great apps for live logging. So especially if you're interview situations and things like that, you can set up a set of keywords, you can add data, all this metadata during the process of shooting, of interviewing. I would definitely look at their products if you do that kind of work. It's really fantastic. There was a couple of questions. I keep moving between computers a lot when editing. Do you have any tips on keeping multiple Macs organized on the motion templates folder besides just copying the folder between each Mac? Three notes on that. Number one is if you use FX Factory, that platform will automatically manage them all for you. So any plugins that are on that platform, don't ever copy them manually. Just let it do its thing, and it will keep everything up to date. That's one thing I like about that platform. Things that are not in that platform, you will need to copy manually, with the exception that you can set something up where you create symlinks to a network location that point to your local motion templates folder in user movies motion templates. But it has to be the correct kind of symlinks for that to work. So that's my three notes on that. It's a little bit of a pain. There is an option to put all your motion templates in your library when you consolidate, Personally, haven't found that to work very well, so I prefer not to do that. I like to keep them all in that motion templates folder.
So a couple of quick questions I want to answer from the chat. Does voice isolation update work on Big Sur? No, it does not work. And by the way, someone asked me where it's located. As long as you have the correct version of the OS, it's right there in the audio inspector, right at the top. You'll see it. It says voice isolation. It's a simple checkbox. Thanks, Lyndon, for that question. Someone was asking about automatic ducking. You know, it's really kind of funny. You think iMovie has automatic ducking already built into it. I think that's something that I've always wanted to see in Final Cut. Something that just, hey, it looks at the music, looks at the dialogue, and automatically dips the music for the duration of that particular clip. I think that should be in Final Cut. It's in iMovie, but we don't have it. So that it is what it is. Okay. Let's see here. Newbie question. Do you have any tutorials on working with sound effects? Not specifically tutorial on working with sound effects. So we have an audio tutorial like sound editing and Final Cut that covers a lot of workflow when you're building out a soundtrack, and that includes sound effects and how you work with them, how you tag them, how you organize them with roles, etc. But nothing specific like on sound effects, because sound effects is a subject that's, I think it's contextualized into a larger discussion of mixing something. So there you have that. All right. So I think I'm going to jump back into the spreadsheet because we still have quite a few questions there, Mark. So there was a question about the mouse. I'm going to let's talk about the Logitech mouse. There seems to be a question about like how you set this up for working with Final. Both Mark and I use this mouse as opposed to the Magic Mouse. And the reason is, and I love how you can program these buttons to do various things within Final Cut. It's pretty easy to set up. We did a video on it, but you know, I'll take responsibility. Perhaps I wasn't clear enough on how to set it up. But basically, you just go to Logi Options. There's an app that ships with
Logi Options Plus.
Logi Options Plus, right. So it's really simple. You basically go up to your applications and you say, oh, look, there's Final Cut. Final Cut. Oh, I want to program that button to do a trim from start and that one to trim from end. So you select it and it says, oh, look, keyboard assignment. Oh, look, what do I want to do? It's like, is it Option, left bracket? Yay, that one's assigned. Click that one. I want that one to be the Option, right bracket. Done. And now, when you're in Final Cut, I don't know if I have one. So now I use these buttons. I can just press the button and look at that. Oops, that was a extreme example. Anyway, so I just showed you how to do it. That's all there is to it. Okay.
That was great. That's a world's fastest demo.
Right.
That was awesome.
Okay. Let's move on to this next one about, there's a question about what we use for our setup. And I mean, I brought my camera. So there was a question about, do you plan on doing a course on shooting video with a mirrorless? What photographers need to know? Frame rate, getting sound right? Do you use a Ninja? Why do you need it? Well, this is a larger question. There's so much good content on YouTube. I'm really ambivalent about creating a tutorial when there's just so much info about how to set up. This is an A7S III, how to set up the camera, how to set up the Ninja. But bottom line for us is that this monitor in the field is so bright, and it just gives you a better screen, a bigger screen than the back screen. So you can record to the Ninja in ProRes and H.265 or 264. But I tend to, and this is for me, I tend to use the on-camera recording codecs because they keep the files small. I'm not a huge ProRes capture guy because I just don't like dealing with huge files. And also with RAW, I just don't shoot a lot of RAW. I prefer a good log signal. I could do a lot with a good log signal. And the fact of the matter is there's the amount of available settings for these ProRes RAW is it's so limited to just a handful of cameras. I just don't find it that useful. Give me a good log setting that's a small footprint that I can store on my server. It's not going to take up a lot of space. And that's
just in terms of that Ninja, I don't know if you can see in my reversed shot here.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I've got the monitor mounted. I'm actually having my Ronin S2. as my tripod right here on my setup. And I've got my Ninja mounted here as a monitor. I'm just using a monitor here, but I also record to it as well, Steve. So we both are kind of fans of that.
Yeah, so it's that Ninja is a really, really great piece of hardware. Couple of questions here. One is on the new Macbook Pro, how critical is it to use external SSD drive on your library project in FCP? What are the advantages of using external drive? I personally, well, where is it? I'm a big fan of these little Samsung's T drives. This is pretty much what I use to edit on my MacBook Pro. I don't store media, and I keep all my media libraries external so that I can plug this in and work with the different Macs. And I keep the libraries themselves on my internal hard drive. I don't keep my libraries on the drive itself. The library is like all your edit decisions, and I prefer to keep those separate. Even if I lost the media, I have all my edits still there, and I can just restore from a backup or relink to a backup. So I tend to want my libraries local media on a fast SSD.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah.
I use those all the time as well, T5s or T7s, mostly when I'm traveling.
Yeah.
But at home, I have an older Promise RAID. And the reason I'm bringing it up is somebody else on here said, hey, I've got an hour-long movie in the chat that what should I do for storage? You don't have to use SSDs. SSDs are great, but for a large amount of external storage, they're still quite expensive. And for most footage, if you have a Thunderbolt connected RAID that's hard drives, that's like a RAID 5, it's going to be great. I think there's a little bit, it's funny, we're moving to like, I have to have a Mac Studio Ultra and I have to have an SSD RAID in order to be able to edit 4K footage, and you just don't. You don't need that much horsepower for a lot of things. You can, hard drives are still totally viable solutions for external storage. Just with any external storage, have a backup plan. A RAID 5 gives you some protection if one of the drives fails, but it's not a backup plan. A backup plan is having a whole totally separate drive that you're backing that to, and also putting it in the cloud.
Yeah, in fact, there was a
backup.
There was a question that was asked about Time Machine. I'm just gonna. This is a good place to insert that question. Should I use Time Machine for backups? And one of the things I don't like about Time Machine is that it treats Final Cut Library Bundle as a single file, and so you end up keep backing up the same library over and over, and your drive gets filled up. So I'm not a fan of Time Machine for library backups. If you want incremental backups where it's looking inside the bundle and it's looking what's changed inside there, you're better off with Carbon Copy Cloner. That's a much better choice for backing up your libraries than Time Machine. Any comments on that, Mark? Or
I totally agree. I'm a big fan of CCC.
Yeah. So there's a question about, and you could I'm going to do a quick demo here, Mark, as you look at the questions there.
Sure.
Do you know if the new versions of SCP Motion will be optimized to take advantage of all that extra computing horsepower on the new Mac Studio? I do a lot of work with multicam clips. Really hope that when a new Mac Studio M1 Ultra arrives, it will perform extremely. I can tell you, you're going to be very impressed. I'm going to jump over to my Mac, and this is what, just to show you, I'm going to just take these 3 multicam clips here of these guys we shot out in the field. This is like a 30-minute multicam clip. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click and choose New Multicam. And typically, you would want to use audio for synchronization. That process, depending how long your angles are and how many of them, that could take quite a while. So just by comparison, I took those 3 angles and I did a test on my iMac Pro. It took 1 minute and 10 seconds to synchronize those angles using that. Now I'm going to go ahead and do it for you. I notice I've set audio, everything's set to automatic. I'm going to click OK, and boom. It's literally done. Actually, did I select? I may not have selected all of them. My fault. Look, it's cake. Anyway, it's all I'm saying is, let me see if I got it. I don't think I selected the right angle. Let me try this one more time. Let me see this test. One more time.
You already have one called test.
Oh, test 2. How's that? All right. Okay, so what I've discovered is taking these long 30-minute 3-angle clips, it literally took less than 10 seconds to sync them. So the answer is absolutely you will get a huge performance boost on your M1 Max or M1 Ultra. I use multicam all the time, and that feature alone makes it worth leaving that checkbox checked. Because sometimes you're like, no, I'm just going to sync with markers because I don't want to have to go through all that, that syncing process, which takes computer cycles. So I'll just sync it by, clap or marker. But with an M1, you don't even have to do that. It's so fast. Anyway, that's my take on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I ordered one. I canceled it because I wasn't sure about the right configuration, and I've been holding off, but I got to get that. Okay, a couple ones from our spreadsheet. Maybe Steve, you can look at the chat while I'm doing these. There's one person was asking about what you just talked about, also asking about our thoughts on the studio display. When I first saw that, the main thing that I came away with that immediately, I didn't think it was adequate nits for doing HDR work. If that were like the Pro XDR display, I would buy it. I would buy it. But to me, it's too expensive for what it does personally, just because of the brightness. Something you can't really use for even web-based HDR, in my opinion. Yeah. How to change the name of titles in Final Cut and still have them function? I have never seen this question before. I don't know why you want to change the name of a title in Final Cut, but you can. What you would do is right-click on it, say open a copy in Motion, and then save that with a name that you want, and then you can stick it anywhere you want. You can apply a theme to it and have a different category for it. If you want to maybe you want to customize it, you can put a group of them in one place, but that would be the way to change the name and have them still function. Is it possible to lock portions of a video? Steve, I'm looking at one. Okay, I'll just read it. When working with multiple cameras and sources, is it possible to lock portions of a video from alterations when making changes to other parts of the video? I find myself unintentionally messing up previous clips with changes that are not fully visible until after the export is completed. I'll go back to fix the error, but sometimes throws off audio and video sync, among other issues. Thank you for all the help over the years. I don't totally understand the question. The only thing I could think of is you can make a new parent clip if you have multiple copies of a multicam clip, the same as a compound clip. You have multiple copies, you make a change inside one multicam clip, that's going to flow through to all copies of that multicam clip, unless you make a new parent clip. So you can choose a clip, and the menu, I believe, is clip, make new parent clip. And then that one won't be affected by changes you make to other ones. I don't know if that's the issue, but that's what comes to mind for me.
I got the sense, and again, I think we need more feedback. I got the sense he had a bunch of stuff in the timeline. He was doing stuff upstream that was affecting stuff downstream, and things were getting wacky. And you want to know if you could lock a clip in the timeline. Well, the definitive answer is no. You can't lock anything in Final Cut. It would defeat the whole purpose of the magnetic timeline. So we'd have to see your timeline, what you're doing. We could perhaps offer a suggestion about maintaining sync or using some of the tools like the link override tool or whatever, gap clips. There's a lot of different ways to maintain sync. So I don't, we need more info. But Mark's point is true. If you are working with a container clip, you gotta make another instance of it. And one of the things I like about the snapshot feature of Final Cut is that if you work on a multicam clip, you can make a snapshot of it and it keeps it in that state, or even a compound clip, snapshot the progress and then keep working. So you always have a version that's not affected by whatever changes you're making on your clip in your timeline. Okay.
Awesome.
Let's see. I want to go back to some of the questions that are being posted live. Let's see. So there's questions about what RAID should I buy? Well, that's we've used Promise RAIDs for a long time. We have a Promise RAID that's got 12 terabytes, and the RAID isn't in the room, so it's not listening, is it? Okay, I don't want it to listen because it's been literally going for almost I want to say 10 years now.
Knock on wood right
yeah,
knock on wood right
it's
now.
It's not listening, is it? It's been 10 years, and it's still downstairs. I promise it's been the best RAID ever. So
yeah, just make sure there's not a bunch of cat hair in that thing.
Exactly.
So hey, it's funny. You mentioning that because there's some questions somebody's mentioning Backblaze in the chat, Stephen Wick, and I use Backblaze, and I back up my 12 terabyte Promise RAID two backplays. I use that to have an an off-site backup. I think that's a good idea. And also a couple people mentioning Topaz, Ben Balzer recommending it. We both do too. I think Steve, you took advantage of the sale, right? That was a little bit ago.
Yeah, I got it on sale around the holidays, and that Topaz. Oh my gosh, I'm so impressed with how it can upscale HD to 4K and then noise removal. I think anybody should have Topaz, but if you're not working on an M1 Mac, you just literally should go on vacation because it's going to take a while.
Yeah. Exactly. But it's pretty amazing. Like I used it on some old DV footage, just upres it to HD, and looked really good. So they have products for photographs. They have products for video. If you need to upres stuff, I check it out. 10-year-old Drobo. Oh man, I wouldn't use that Drobo. I don't trust those things. How long did it take to back up 12 terabytes? Raymond asks. So yeah, it's many weeks, but you just let it run. It runs all night. It runs all the time. And then eventually it's done. And then it just is incrementally backing up stuff I add to it. So, but it depends on your connection. I'm lucky right here. I've got fiber. So I've got synchronous, gigabyte up and down. So it's, 1,000 megabytes per second if I'm directly connected. So it goes pretty quick, but still 12 terabytes is a bit. What do you suggest as a monitor for non-HDR? That's a really big subject.
I found some good ones, some really good ones from LG on B&H that are around $500, and they get really good reviews. Like something like 600 nits, same nit value as the $1,700 Apple display, and a really good, budget monitor for if you don't need HDR. You could spend about $500 on a good LG. I don't have the model number here, but there are definitely options out there. I mean, I personally think that Apple display, while I like it, it's just so expensive. I mean, yeah, it's got good speakers in it and a nice webcam. That's great. I mean, I understood why Apple needed to make it. They wanted to pair it with their studio, and it makes sense. I just find it, for what it is, a little overpriced, in my humble opinion.
I just posted in the chat. Johnny Elwin did a good article about color grading monitors, so you could check that out and see. It's a complicated topic these days with the whole HDR and depending if you're doing web or broadcast delivery.
Cool. So so I noticed in the chat there's a lot of discussion about backup options, which is really good. Okay, getting back to our spreadsheet here. There was a question. I purchased many of your trainings. Helps me transition from Premiere to Final Cut. Well, welcome on board from Premiere. It's been great. One thing, I can't seem to find quality information on screen replacement on items such as iPhones, computer screens. In the past, my workflow has been Premiere into After Effects combined with Mocha Pro Planar Tracker would deliver flawless results, especially when there's a camera movement. Yes. That's the point. Mocha has got the best planar tracker on the planet, and you really need a planar tracker. The object tracker is not a planar tracker; it's an object tracker. So it's looking at pixels and whatnot. With a planar tracker, it's looking at perspectives, and it's more sophisticated in how it goes about tracking things. What I would recommend if you need a planar tracker is Core Melt. It's called Track X. Let's see if I can bring it up here.
I'll paste a link.
Paste a link. But Core Mount Track X is what you want for that functionality. Okay. There's a question about Final Cut doesn't save my render. Every time I start FCP to render again, I have to render again. I think, you can post in the comments there, but I think everybody in the chat has experienced, I've rendered this thing, I open it up, and then the render files are gone. I have no explanation. Sometimes it doesn't do it. Sometimes it does. I just don't have any reason. I don't know what the reason for it. Obviously, if it should be looking in the renders folder every time it launches. But anyway, I'd be interested in your comment. Yes.
The only thing I'd add to that is for some people, they're rendering when they don't need to. So just it's definitely an issue. But I would also ask you, why are you rendering? And it depends on if it's like, well, I've done a lot of effects and I can't play back in real time. That's a great reason to render. But if you're just rendering because the dots are there and you want to get rid of the dots, if you're able to play back, don't render. If you're not able to play back, maybe you could optimize or use proxy media as other options if you're rendering all the time. Just some other options to consider, but like for most of the stuff that I do not need to render, and I never render. And I don't render before export, because when you kick off an export, it's going to render for export. So you don't need to render in advance before exporting.
Good, really good. Awesome. All right, we're just going to keep moving forward at breakneck speed here. So next question, I'm currently editing a series of clips from a larger timecode where client is specified from to timecode they want for each clip. I'm entering from the from timecode, selecting the range tool, then dragging it to the end timecode, and then exporting each clip. This is imprecise, and I often accidentally click and reset my selection. Is there any way to select the range tool, then just enter the start and finish timecode, select the range rather than, yes, all of that. You can do that. So let me see, let's see here. Let's see if I can find a demo that I had planned for this. All right, so I have this clip. This clip right now has, well, this is my friend Steve Bays, and
I recognize that guy.
Exactly. The first thing I want to show you is the window menu. You have project timecode and source timecode. And this is a question that came up. By choosing project timecode, hey, look at this. You get this nice big, you get this, all right, I'm going to say, you get a nice big ass timecode window that you could scrub and move around, which is really handy, right? But the problem is, like, I know this clip has timecode, and the reason I know it does is because if I skim inside it, watch the viewer here, you can see it has empty timecode right there. But that doesn't, you know, the timeline timecode's different. So therefore, I recommend going to the window menu and choosing source timecode, and now you get two windows, which is really handy because now, not only when you're skimming, you see the source timecode in one window and the timeline timecode or time display in another. I'm not a fan of changing the timeline to match the time code of the file because, look, the problem is if I started the timeline at 14 hours, I wouldn't get a sense of how far in am I? Am I 26 minutes in? Am I 15 minutes in? How far am I in? I prefer leaving the timeline always set at 0 so I know time-wise, and then turn source timecode on so I can see where the timecode is. Now, to the question you said, specific, is that I can go over and I could say, you don't have, what he's doing is this. So he's saying, all right, I want to jump to, let's say I'm getting notes and I need to go to 5 seconds in the timeline. So I'm going to press Control P and I'm going to type 5 period return. And that moves to 5 seconds in the timeline. And I'm going to press I. Now I want to go to, now my notes from my client says, you need to go to 6 seconds or 7 seconds and 15 frames. Control P, 7.15, return. Oh, I've just set an in and out range completely with timecode without even touching my mouse. So that is how you would do it. That's how I would do it. Okay. Awesome.
Hey Steve, I'm gonna address a couple of the motion questions.
Yes.
Kind of put them together from because we had some advanced questions about motion. One was, does motion have any way to precompose other than grouping or rendering a movie, or to parent one layer to another? I hate renting After Effects from Adobe, but I sure miss those capabilities. So the way I would answer that is yes.
That was
but it's a qualified yes. So if you look at my screen here, first of all, grouping is a way of parenting. And I know this person said beside grouping, but I just want to show, for example, I have this thermometer over here, and it has this little ball on the bottom is one shape, and then there's this little rectangle shape, and there's this mask in here, and there's the tube. So it's got all these components, but they're all within the same group, which allows me to move them all together, the temperature's not right within there, or scale them all together as a single item. So grouping is or apply effects to them. Grouping is really powerful in motion. Another option is using the link behavior. So you can see I have the link behavior right here attached to the rotation of this dial, and it affects the position of this mask. So what that means is if I go to that dial right here and I rotate it, that mask raises and it raises the temperature of the thermometer. I also have two links to this numbers, one for the value of the numbers and one for their position. So once again, when I rotate that knob, those numbers rise and the numbers change to represent temperature. So the link behavior is a great way to link disparate parameters to each other. So grouping and linking are really useful. One more example I'll show you is here. These objects are actually these gears. And here I can move this whole thing around in 3D space so you can look at it from different angles. These are text objects. It's just I made a custom font, and these are text objects and treated as text and made, materials added to them. But the reason they're all turning in sync with each other is because I have one rate behavior turning one of them, and all the other ones have link behaviors. And some of them have a scale of 1, and some of them have a scale of -1, like this one, because it's rotating in the opposite way. So once again, I'm using these link behaviors to drive animation. Finally, there was a question about, let me just read it, because I think it's a little easier. In motion, I have a circle right on that lasts for 2 seconds. I'd like to repeat that for the 15-minute duration of the project. I don't want to recreate that circle hundreds of times, and I know there has to be a way, I just can't figure it out. So I'm not quite sure why you want to do that, but I'm going to ignore that for a minute. So I have a circle shape here, which is just a shape that I've turned off the fill. If I go to the shape style, you can see I've turned the fill off and I have the outline on. And I'm going to go to behaviors under shape and add the write on behavior, which by default now will write that on over the whole duration of that shape. But we want it to last for 2 seconds. So I'm going to change the speed to custom. And then I'll move my playhead to 2 seconds, approximately, right there. And I'll bring in this keyframe so that it now writes on for 2 seconds. But you want it to repeat. You want to do it over and over again. Well, check this out. If you go to Window and go to the keyframe editor, and I'll just open this up a little bit, for this custom speed, we can click right here and say, after last keyframe, simply repeat. And look at that. You can see it in the keyframe editor. So if I play that now, it'll draw on, and then it'll do it again, and it'll do it again, for as long as your project is. Or you could choose after last keyframe ping pong, and then it would draw on and write off, and draw on and write off, and go back and forth. Super powerful option in the keyframe editor to repeat keyframes over time. So hopefully, I'm not sure, I'd be interested in why you want that to happen over and over again for 15 minutes. But that's a great question for having an opportunity to talk about after last keyframe.
All right, so I'm going to jump back in to the spreadsheet. We have a few more I want to get through. There was a question about constant bit rate versus variable bit rate. It says, the question is, the export settings are a bit limited in Final Cut. The team I work with are very anti-FCP, dissing it as non-professional, a grown-up iMovie. And on this occasion, having a variable bit rate has caused problems with their streaming system. A hyperdeck that plays ProRes files but plays back stuttery if video is VBR. Current workaround for them is using Compressor to recompress my exports. Next step is me putting it through DaVinci where I can control the export as I don't have Compressor. Okay, that's a mouthful there. So here's a couple things. One is that it's odd to me that they're saying that they're having problems with ProRes files because, well, all ProRes files are VBR. They're variable bit rate encoding. They're not CBR, and you cannot change them in Final Cut. You cannot change them in Compressor. They are VBR. So if their playout system is having problems with ProRes, I'd have to know more why they would. I'm sure Ben Balzer, he works with these playout systems. He could probably tell you better than I could. There are certain settings in Compressor that you can set for certain codecs for like constant bit rate encoding, depending on the codec you're choosing. But ProRes isn't one of them. Also, Compressor's $50. I don't understand why everyone wouldn't just have that on their system. It has so many useful functions. If you watch my video that I just did, I use it all the time now for batch processing stuff. It's just really handy. Okay.
Steve, can I do
sure.
just one more demo? Because
Yeah.
I think people are going to really be helped with this. This is one of the questions asked earlier, And it was basically, I'm not going to read the whole question, but it was how to manually adjust part of a track. So you've tracked something with the object tracker in Final Cut Pro, and part of it isn't quite right. And they're saying, hey, when I try to fix it manually, it just messes everything up. So here's how I'm going to show you how to do this. And I think this is super, super useful. So I've got this shot of our hero, Steve, as a Roman soldier on a horse. And it's a log clip. It's got a LUT on it, but he's still kind of dark. So I'd like to lighten his face up and adjust his face a little bit. So what I'm going to do is go to the color inspector. I'll make a little change on it just so that I make the mask active, the shape mask. I'll add the shape mask. I'll hold down the Option key as I drag it over and it recognizes his face. I'll make sure I'm on the tracker. There it is. I'll click Analyze. And even on my aging 2019 MacBook Pro with Intel Mac, soon to be replaced, but still working great. There we go. And it analyzes and does a great job. So what I'll do now is I'll switch to the shape. And I want to bring that feathering down. And under exposure, I'm just going to kind of brighten up his face a little bit there. And if I turn off the mask and turn that off and on, you know, it's like that really does a great job. You can see him a little bit better now. But check this out. If we go kind of toward the beginning, and I'm going to zoom in here. Let's zoom into 200% so we can see what's going on. When he turns his head sideways, notice how it's lighting up the sky. Like here, it's great. Maybe I want it a little bit smaller, but about like that. And then here, like that's no good at all. So you might think, oh, I'm just going to drag it over here. But notice I'm going to use the arrow keys to go one frame at a time. And notice it shifts over and it shifts right back again. All that did was change it on that one frame. So that's kind of a pain in the butt. So here's what you do. I'm going to undo that. So we're back to just where it was, where it's kind of off right there. The way to do this, to manually adjust a track, is you want to switch the tracker from pin to tracker to offset from tracker. In the previous implementation, before 10.6.2, if you haven't updated, there was a little link icon, but now it's been replaced by using this here. So once you offset it, what I'm going to do is right before he turns, I'm going to set a keyframe over here for the shape mask by clicking on the keyframe button. And then I'm going to go to the left to the point where you start seeing that over there. And now I'm going to drag it, and I'll also rotate it a little bit. And notice now if I scrub through that, it moves over for me. And then here I'll just move it over a little bit further. And now it's interpolating between the keyframe I set manually and then dragging it. So it really does a job for me. And here he turns again. So I'll set a keyframe. I'll move a little bit forward and slide it back a little bit. And then if I scrub between those, it now stays right where I want it to. So if I hide that mask and Shift Z to zoom out, now that looks really good. And we'll look, here's before, and you can see, you know, he's very dark. And there I've lightened him up. And now I've done an automatic track, but I've tweaked it. And the key is to not have it be pinned, but to have it float separately. The word is, what's the word? That I want to use
unlinked?
here. Yeah, well, I can't remember the name there. I got to turn that on again so we can see it. Sorry. Yeah, but I unlinked it, so it was no longer, here we go. There's a pop-up menu. Sometimes it's hard to get that back. Offset from tracker, that was it. Offset. And then set a keyframe in order to do that. So really allows you to fix a track that's shifted off. So hopefully that helps out that person and maybe somebody else who is watching today.
Awesome. A couple of questions that I definitely want to get to in the spreadsheet. One of them had to do with, let's see here. Hi guys, I want to say thank you for your expertise doing this webinar. Is there any way to get a large counter? I just answered that, I thought. But there was, I'm sorry, that wasn't the question. This is the question. Could you demonstrate exporting XML round trip from FCP 10.6.2 to Resolve? My exports are FCP XMLD files. Resolve does not seem to recognize them. I have watched your tutorial in Final Cut and on your DaVinci Resolve and back from Travis last year, and it's frustrating. Okay, here's the thing. There's a new XML file, and let me just explain when you'll see. Let me go to go to here. There's a new way to, when you export this out, or actually say when a file export XML, what's being referred to is this right here. You have a previous version and a current. And what's happening with this current version is that it's making what's called a bundle. And that bundle, there's a series of files inside it. And the reason why Apple had to make that bundle is because their timelines are getting more sophisticated. Think about it. There's now cinematic data information. There's stabilization data. There's color. There's all this information now. There's tracking data now. Now, if they used a straight XML file, just text, that text is going to become, have to describe all of that. So Apple said, you know what, let's get smart about this. Let's separate the XML file, just the cuts and whatnot. Audio is what's one thing. And inside the bundle, let's put all of that other data as separate items. And they've simplified it. The problem is a lot of apps don't read that new XML bundle. So if you want to have it behave exactly like Travis showed, you're going to want to use previous version of XML. Okay, and that will just solve the issue. Don't save the bundle. And at some point when other apps start recognizing the bundle, that's what we'll do. Philip Hodgetts actually has a really good article on the subject. If you want to go to Philip Hodgetts' website, it's the present and future of post-production business and technology. And then this is he's explains very well with how this bundle technology. I'll post it in the chat below so you can understand. All right, cool. All right.
A couple more just from the submitted earlier. This is kind of an interesting one. He said, he or she, I don't know who submitted this. I received ProRes Proxy files for a project I'm editing in Final Cut from the cinematographer who generated the proxies in Resolve from the B-raw originals. Do I need to go to Resolve to output the final project to ProRes? You shouldn't. Here's what you need to do. So when you bring those in, don't treat them as proxies. You treat them as original media, and you're going to see the problem is if they're different frame size, you might not be able to relink, but you should have them send you. They're going to need to generate ProRes versions of those as well because Final Cut's not going to be able to work with the B-raw files. But I would have them send you one of those files exported as ProRes 422HQ, whatever you're using for your final, and then see if you can do a relink by just selecting one of the ProRes clips, one of the proxy clips in your timeline, and choose relink media and see if it'll allow it to happen. If it does, you're good. Other than that, I don't think that's going to be an easy workflow, personally, unless there's another way to consider those as actual proxies.
Yeah, it's a bit challenging, only because it sounds to me like he wants to end up back in Resolve. We have access to all that B-raw media. It gets might get a little tricky only because, again, of round tripping, and we'll all be able to I would assume that as long as the file names have kind of the same name, that Resolve is not going to care if it's relinking to something of a different size or number of audio tracks, what have you. Unlike Final Cut, it's very persnickety about it. We'd have to do a test,
And actually, Steve, I think you're right. If they're going back to Resolve to finish it, you don't even want to try to do a relink in Final Cut. What you want to do is take those proxies, do a quick edit of 2 of them or 3 of them, and send that XML back. If you don't have Resolve there with those originals, send it back to them and see if they're able to then relink those proxies to the B-raw.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would work or not.
Yeah, great. So there was a question about working with Compressor and creating the smallest footprint HEVC files to save space on their drive and also their space on their Vimeo account. What he described is, or I'm not sure who described, was like they use the HEVC 8-bit preset in Compressor to export HEVC files out for Vimeo. Yes, I think that's I thought about it. I agree with that workflow. Use the HEV preset built into Compressor, or then you can also create a preset that's accessed within Final Cut and then just export out your HEVC media directly from Compressor or as a preset from Final Cut. And now what's really great is you can save out HEVC files in 10-bit 10.422. That's pretty cool. I mean, if you're shooting, if you're shooting on a camera like this shoots in 10-bit 422. And now Compressor is going to maintain all of the color data from these files. So I definitely recommend using that preset in the new version of Compressor. Of course, you're going to need an M1 Mac and you're going to need Monterey to have access to the HEVC 10-bit option within Compressor.
The other nice thing about that preset is if you're working with like stuff shot in HDR, like on an iPhone, it retains all that metadata, so it will look great on other iOS devices. Chris Fenwick, get a hold of yourself, man.
Hey, the Fenwick's in the house. Good to see you, Chris.
Brian, it would be nice just to have B-roll in Final Cut. Yeah, it would. And it would be also nice to have ProRes RAW in DaVinci Resolve. Work it out, guys. Agreed. Let's see, a couple other things in the chat. Do you know if Pluralize is working now with the new version of Final Cut? Do not know. Hope they do. For those people who use Pluralize, I know it can be a useful product. Any way to override when relink clips out of audio channels that do not match? I don't know a way to override when you don't get the relink to work. I don't know of one. If somebody does, please jump in.
Yeah. Cool. Looking at
okay, I know there's a bunch in here. If we missed you in the chat, please go ahead and post it again, because it's so hard to scroll up through here and try to figure out what we answered and didn't.
Mark, this sounds something crazy, and I don't know if Travis has seen this, but I just have to bring it up here. Let me switch over to Final Cut for a moment. Let me see. Let's see. So, one of the things that this is a small but such an important thing. I know that maybe I could find a longer version of it here. Maybe this multicam. Oh, everything's offline there. All right. Well, one of the things is that now you can like zoom in. The waveforms draw themselves really fast now, and no more, Travis. No more waiting for that waveform.
My question is on playback, and if you scroll, will there be waveforms, or do you have to stop playback to see them? Press play and scroll to the right.
Say it again. Say it again.
So he says, my question is, go ahead and say it again.
My question is when playing back Final Cut timeline, if it's playing and you scroll to the right before, there be no waveforms. They have to be preloaded, and in order to load them, you have to stop playback. Once upon a time, Final Cut, if you zoomed into the timeline, you could scroll the whole timeline and preload all the waveforms, and they would stay there on playback. Now, it will only show what was on the timeline when you started playback, and you have to stop playback to draw waveforms. Does that work now? Press play and scroll to the right.
Yep.
All right. See, that's why I wanted. That's why I wanted a longer
longer
clip.
one.
Yeah, I wanted a
longer. It's a
longer.
great question because I deal with that all the time. Yeah. I'm always stopping playback.
So to get the new waveforms,
you got to pause.
And when you're voiceover editing, it's really frustrating.
Okay. So apparently you do have to pause before the waveform redraws. And he's saying at one point you never had to pause, because it would cache the entire waveform. And he could, while he's voiceover editing, he can move the timeline, and that waveform would be there. There wouldn't be just like these, little lines that say, "Hey, I'll draw you next time you stop." Anyway.
Yeah, I've just been going through that right now because I have an hour-long thing I'm editing, and I want to see the waveforms for what's coming up instead of. So I always pause to do that. Yeah, pretty funny. Okay, I know we have more. So if you got a question in the chat and we didn't get to it, please post it again. Jacob says B-roll and Final Cut workaround until native support. Color Finale transcoder allows you to import B-roll, area raw, and Cinema DNG directly in Final Cut Pro. Yes and no. Honestly, it's a cool thing, but it's not doing anything new. It's just transcoding to ProRes the same way you would transcode to ProRes in Resolve. So it's still transcoding your B-roll. It's not letting you work with it natively in Final Cut. Just want to clarify that. But it is makes it a way to do so you don't have to use Resolve to do it. To batch export for Instagram and YouTube at the same time in one video, is that a need to have a compressor app and can't be done in Final Cut? Well, if you really want to build a batch to submit a batch, that's what Compressor's all about, for sure.
I mean, you could create a compressor bundle in Final Cut. You can make a bundle, right?
That's a good point.
If you don't,
that's a good point.
Right? If you don't have if you don't have compressor, you can go into destinations and you could say, all right, you could create a custom preset, drag this bundle in there, and then you can have different versions of your output. You can say, all right, I want, let's see, where's my export file? There's maybe one version there, and that with its own set of settings, and there's another version there. So this could be like your square version, and there could be your wide version, and then you can apply that bundle to your clips or your timelines in Final Cut. So basically, what this
throw YouTube or Instagram,
right, through your
in there.
Yeah, so you don't need compressor to
That's true. That's a good point. Good point. Right. Yeah, you just export to the bundle, and it kicks off and exports them all. That's exactly right. That's great, Steve. I forgot about that.
Yeah, we forget about a lot of stuff. We're getting old, Mark.
There's more going out than coming in, I'll tell you that. Somebody said in our list, in our pre-submitted, can I submit an idea for an effect to be made? Yes, please do. I don't know your name. Sorry, but if you can do it in the chat window here. You can always send us an email to support@rippletraining.com, and we will see it there. So we'd be happy to see that. Thank you, Unmarketing Group. Don't know your name personally, but thank you very much. Much appreciated. Is there a way to override when relinking clips? We already talked about that. About to do some kind of test using the new Mac Studio Ultra to do things in Apple Motion. Some people were saying that it takes longer to see better performance. I have not tested M1 with Motion, so I can't answer that. When I open Motion, I get a window of a plugin that Motion says are out of date. I cannot find them on my system. It takes almost 8 minutes to open Motion. How do I fix these? Richard, I don't know what you installed, but you might have installed some old, I don't want to blame CoreMelt for this, but CoreMelt has some old plugins that I would see that if you go to your library application support plugins, it might be the root library application support plugins, or it might be user library application support plugins. I'd look in both of those and see if you've got something installed there and try moving it out and see if that fixes the problem.
I'm looking through our spreadsheet one more time. I think I can't believe we got through almost 50 questions plus the chat like in this session, Mark.
Yeah, well, it's been an hour and a half. I think we should probably bring it to a close.
Yeah, so, so it's probably a, yes, sir. Is there a question?
Oh, you're good.
All right, okay, good. So, yeah, it probably is. We're at the hour and 30-minute mark. And so that's a nice segue. Yes, sir.
Do you want to mention the spring sale?
Yes, I do. All right. So for those of you who haven't picked up one of our tutorials, we are running a spring sale, and you should see it right here on the bottom. And if you use that code, you can get any tutorial on our site at 30% off. I'd recommend the green screen tutorial, Mark, and of course, the tracker one. Of course, we're updating. But my Final Cut Pro tutorial, my 7-hour tome on Final Cut is available. You can use that code for any of it. Just remind anyone.
Just to clarify.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Just to clarify on the object tracker, if you do buy it on sale, you'll get the update for free. Everything in there is fully accurate. It just has the UI change, but that you can buy it now and you'll get the update for free.
Awesome. Yeah, just a reminder, I will be, for those of you going to NAB, I'll be going there. I just found out yesterday. So, I'll probably be at the Super Meet if you want to come by and say hi. If you go to the conference portion of the NAB site, you can see all the FCP classes. I'll be teaching there. So if you happen to be there, be good to see you. Anyway, so that was a really fun session, Mark. We got through a lot of questions. So, it's fun.
If you subscribed and you made it to the end, but you didn't like what you saw, you go for the unsubscribe.
But you're doing it in an inversion of what we normally say.
I know. Well, nobody like watches to the end to subscribe. So I'm just saying up front, go ahead and subscribe. If you don't like it, then leave. We're so close to 100,000.
Yeah, we want to get our little Google Play. I mean,
a little plaque. Yeah. Right. All right. Well, this has been fun. We'll do it again. We'll go to 31 sometime here. But thank you guys. Thank you everybody thanks for your contributions. Thanks for your questions. If there's no questions, there's nothing for us to do here. So this has been really great and fun to do. And we'll see you guys on social media. And Steve, we'll probably see you in person here. Some of you guys.
All right. Thanks again for watching the 30th episode of Ripple Live. We'll see you on the next Mac Break Studio episode. Thanks for watching, and you guys have a great weekend.
Take care, everybody.